CAS Public Service and Gender.
Morning, Sam.
Welcome back. Good morning. And Edwin Sifuna, SG ODM. Welcome back. And Dan Manzo, MP for Makueni Constituency. Thank you all for making time for us. And it's time that we focus on the latest in several sectors of the country, including what's in the papers today. You see that on the front page of the Standard, Raila goes for the heart of Mount Kenya. This is continuation of the story that we just watched a few minutes ago. Of course, Raila Odinga had been in Laikipia for about 3 days, an ODM leader, to meet a group of wealthy Central Kenya businessmen to discuss the region's economic development, which the Jubilee government has been accused of neglecting. Then on the front page of this Daily Nation, ministers at center of Uhuru succession. Leadership and Integrity Act sets parameters within which public officers operate, and the powerful cabinet secretaries whose influence will shape the 2022 presidential elections, whether they run for office or not. And the first among equals might grab the trophy. The faces of Fred Matiang'i, Peter Munya, Joe Musheru, Ukur Yatani, Keriako Tobiko, Mutahi Kagwe, Raphael Tuju, Eugene Omalwa, and John Munyes. Some of them have run for political office. We're talking of Munya, Ukur Yatani, Mutahi Kagwe, Tuju, Eugene and John Munyes, and they said that they'll play a critical role in next year's election. And let me begin there, because yesterday we were having a conversation on what happens when some of these CSs decide to run for political office. Of course, we know that senior civil servants or civil servants that decide to run will have to step out of office. Is it by Feb next year? And we're asking the question, then what would happen to the cabinet of Uhuru Kenyatta in the final days of his term, should that eventuality occur at a time that, for you to name a new cabinet minister or cabinet secretary, you'd have to go through the parliamentary approval. Richard Onyonka, what are your thoughts on the best way to manage this transition if some of these ladies and gentlemen decide to run for office?
I think there isn't much that is going to happen. Most of these cabinet members will stay the time. Most likely, I think I see one or two willing to go back into politics. Most probably Munya. I foresee the rest really playing a part up to the last minute. What is troubling is that I think if you look at the time schedules that the IEBC has given at some point, I think it's about 6 months before the elections, people are expected to have relinquished their positions in office as CSS. And I think many of them are right now very confused on what they are going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And CAS, of course, you've been there, you've run for politics. I don't know whether you have any intention of going back there. And as you think about that, the best way to manage a transition, because the president may be left almost alone if majority of you return to politics, how would ministries continue to run if, especially the senior officers, if it's the CS, CAS or PSs, to leave and go run for politics?
Thank you. I think one of the things that the president will do, first you look at what are the numbers that have left. And in the meantime, one can be acting. You remember there was a time you'll have a CS and also acting for the other ministry. And sometimes you look at how the ministries are, you'll be able to put in others to act. Especially, let's say, for example, if you have a CS of Treasury, there's Treasury, there's planning, and can act in within a ministry that is very close with Treasury, that works together with Treasury. Same way with the Ministry of Agriculture, you can put in the water, fisheries, they will act. Because it's just a few months, and then they also leave. We live in February, so you have March, April, May, June, July. And you need to be now phasing out. So it will be very unfortunate to say you will now go to Parliament to look for a CS. And we have the PSs. The PSs, being the accounting officers, take more charge than the CS. So it can balance. The only thing that it depends how many are going. Nobody knows how many are going to go into the political arena. But if there are like 6, 7, 8, you can merge, and then the PSS can continue working in,
all right.
in those
And SG Sifuna, if you're to reflect on this question on what the law provides, because you have to have a cabinet of between 14 and 22. So what would be the tipping point? And does it also say, is it a moment of reflection that we may have dealt with this differently to allow probably cabinet ministers to continue serving as they run for office as it were in the previous regimes?
I think there's already a decision of the High Court that in fact that requirement for people to step out of public office in order to run 6 months before they contest is actually unconstitutional. So I don't foresee any problems myself. As Honorable Elachi has alluded to, it is possible to, get people to continue to work in acting capacity in those dockets that might have people vacate. But you remember the initial intention was that we rid cabinet of politicians. That was the initial intention, at least the stated intention. But it is clear that we are not going to be able to succeed in that. In the first term of Uhuru and Ruto, I think there was some, uproar when they tried to pass off people like Najib Balala as not being politicians. But I think it is something that we must reflect over, because for Kenyans, really, we don't need our country to stop because we are going into elections. I think Germany had elections on, was it Sunday? Nobody even knows that there was elections. Things are just going on.
And yet they don't have a clear winner.
Even though they don't have a clear winner, those elections were not as noisy as ours. They don't campaign for 3 years before the elections and move around the country making noise instead of focusing on delivering service to Kenyans. So I think it is something to reflect upon. You saw the conversation even during the BBI on the need to probably incorporate even people from the assembly into cabinet to, better the accountability function of parliament. But as you say, it is something to see. If the threshold is not is breached, the 14, then we will have a problem. And I am sure there are Kenyans who are ready and willing to step into to work for those few months.
For those few months.
Yeah.
And Honorable Manzo, if we have less than 14 CSs come March next year or whatever time, would any decision of the cabinet be binding? How would government run?
Ordinarily, from previous experience, mainly the major issue is the budget. From the 2017 experience, the Parliament passed all these things quite early. And you find that by the time it is February, almost everything is set up to July, and in preparation of the new government in August. So I don't think there will be much changes, or there will be a major thing which needs sitting of cabinet then, if the numbers are below 14. And again, it depends on whether somebody raises an issue in court, because that's the only time it becomes an issue. And if it is raised between February and August, chances are high before the court decides, then the new government will have already been formed. So I don't think there is a major thing if it is below 14, but from the look of things under the current cabinet, I think 1 or 2, maximum 3 will leave cabinet to go into politics.
Okay, of course we'll wait to see what happens, but it looks like CS Elachi will be going back to politics?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I want us to make progress. Of course, we'll come back to the stories of the headline of the Standard, Raila goes for the heart of Mount Kenya later on during this discussion. But first, let's take a look at a decision that was made last week by the High Court. That was Justice Murima. And it was a decision on the case that was taken to court by the Kandara Member of Parliament, that is Alice Wahome, to the tune now General Mohammed Badi, the Director General of the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, is no longer allowed to attend cabinet. Let's look at some examples of that decision so that we get the context of what transpired in court. This is Justice Anthony Murima, who said that a declaration hereby issues that the decision to appoint and include Lieutenant General Badi into the business of the cabinet with liberty to attend cabinet meetings and cabinet committee meetings contravenes the constitution and is therefore illegal and void ab initio. He also said that a writ of prohibition hereby issues prohibiting General Badi from attending any cabinet meetings, cabinet committee meetings, and or discharging any functions of the cabinet. Further, Justice Murima found that a writ of certiorari hereby issues quashing the part of the Executive Order number 3 of 2020, which contains the decision to appoint and include General Badi into cabinet meetings and cabinet committee meetings. What else did the judge say? That the appointment of the third respondent into the cabinet was not approved by the National Assembly. As such, it is unclear as to whom and how the third respondent to be oversighted. The term of office of the third respondent in cabinet also remains an illusion. What else did the judge say? That the decision to appoint and include him into the cabinet contravenes those articles of the Constitution, and also saying that one may ask why the third respondent, and yet there are so many other director generals of heads of public institutions in the country. Such questions would have been easily answered had the process towards the inclusion of the third respondent into the cabinet been transparent. And something else, if Kenyans had wanted to credit the president with the discretion to appoint any other person or persons into the cabinet, they would have expressly stated so in the Constitution. The Constitution would have further provided the criteria and procedures for such appointments. And of course, those are just examples of what that decision was. And let me begin with you, CAS Elachi, because now this decision is made. Of course, we recall that executive order saying that Badi would be allowed to attend cabinet meetings. Of course, one, on the face of it, it would appear it was the intention to ensure that the smooth running of the NMS and that the president is well informed of what's going on, bearing in mind that NMS was now being managed by the national government. But when such a decision comes, what does it say about the legal counsel within government that would lead to, because it's not the first decision of the president that is being challenged in court successfully so?
Yes. What I'll say is, one, the legal council team of government, it has been very unfortunate in how they, I think how they manage their cases in a manner where I don't know whether is that rapport that you don't have. I don't know whether it is that way of defending an issue that is a problem in court, because what I know, what government does very wrongly, is that they will just appoint and tell someone, oh, you're supposed to be in court to represent the AG on this. So someone just takes it very casually, and they have, I mean, they've reached a point, we need to ask them, do you see the different fees you're being charged after you lose a case? Mm-hmm. And the many cases that you have lost, people have to be paid. I mean, it's like a big loss, but it's like, to them, up to today, they really don't even care about it. But let me just go now to the main issue. Maybe why it was important to put General Badi on in cabinet is because, first of all, Nairobi is where you collect nearly half of your revenue that is supposed to now go to other counties. We start from there, nearly half. And Nairobi has a potential, if managed well, you can collect 80 billion in this county. But we have left it to people. People wake up in Nairobi, today they are poor, tomorrow they are billionaires. They don't do any work. So it was important for General Badi to be in cabinet to always ensure that you are able to inform the president what is happening, to inform on your deliveries. But then at the same time, I think there was so much. I'll give you an example. You see, the challenge you'll face when you sit in that cabinet is that people, we are used in terms of our tenders, yeah? So you, Badi, General Badi will come in and do a borehole, the way I was seeing the figures. So he does a borehole less than 10 million. But you see, you'll find the Ministry of Water has done boreholes with crazy money. So, you know, at that time, the president will be wondering, what magic are you doing that these other ones cannot do? And I know it will create a lot of conflict with many of them. And even during the hospitals, you remember the 19 hospitals, Badi pushed it. In fact, he wanted to do with less than $1 billion. But I know if you had left it in the hands of the Ministry of Health completely, the figures that they would have quoted with the BQs and everything would have created an uproar. And even today, I know, if you start looking at what NMS has done in terms of their procurement and how they do their things, and these other ministries, definitely there will be a lot of questions with the Kenyans will question why. The why. And so, first of all, I know you don't have friends in that, but the most important thing, I think, is that even now that the courts have freezed, they have to just respect. The president still can sit down with Badi at any given time and make it his and call in Badi any given time to inform him and to just explain this is what is happening. What I want to say with Nairobi, to be very honest, Sam, we have lost it. And I think as a parliament and even now political parties, you know, Nairobi is your key base, key pillar for the country. It's your capital city. Badi has tried to do many things, but it was an insolvent county even when he was coming in. It is just completely run, like right now, so you don't have a governor, fine. You don't have, in the county assembly, you don't have a substantive clerk. And so politicians, to date, they went to court. By the way, Nairobi County is a most interesting county. When I see EACC here talking of some, your promotions, I am wondering, do they know, first of all, the county has no substantive head in either position, and at the same time, you cannot just ignore Nairobi. And I want to tell the president, where we are now, me as a Nairobian, I will tell you, Your Excellency, Nairobi is doing badly. What we are just doing is siphoning money and people just becoming very rich. You walk into one of their institutions,
I thought Badi had tried to deal with that. Still not.
Badi tried. But now, when now you know the problem is, Badi at KICC, this county where the offices are is where the key. You have one chief officer who runs four dockets, and the most lucrative dockets is one person. Then you ask them, what happened to the rest? The rest is taken to agriculture because now they don't want you. I mean, they complained about Sonko, but they have done beyond Sonko now, to be very honest.
Well, those are very serious statements.
Yes.
Bearing in mind that...
oh, yes. And I'm willing to show where we have gone wrong, why we need Nairobi back, and why the president has to wake up and just do a whip. We did a whip when we were bringing Badi. We didn't go through that pain again to see the county go to the dogs. No.
Okay, all right. No. And of course, Sifuna, you're looking at a county that there's an acting governor in the name of Deputy Governor Anne Kananu, and there are certain functions that was transferred to NMS and have been executed from that front. But if you're to reflect on that decision of the High Court, because there's a paragraph that says that their questions would have been easily answered had the process towards the inclusion of Badi into the cabinet been transparent. Yeah. Does this then suggest there's actually a possibility that any other person can be allowed to join or to attend cabinet sittings through some process beyond
I think the transparency that the judge was speaking to is the transparency that is set out in the law on how people end up in cabinet in terms of even public participation and even through vetting in parliament, so that the people's representatives are able to raise the question that the judge was raising. And the questions that you're asking, why is this person going to sit in cabinet and so on and so forth? Why not any other director general of any other institution? I think for me, really, the hallmark of this administration has been this repeated failure by the people who are charged with giving proper legal advice. They repeatedly have failed the president. I had very strong expectations, especially having an attorney general who was himself a member of the bench, that he would then preempt some of these things from happening. It was always going to be difficult to explain how then somebody like that ends up in cabinet, and the process of appointing people to cabinet is set out in the constitution. And even as my sister says, it is actually possible for the president to look for another mechanism in which to interact with the general body and to get those reports and to be able to coordinate government. We have our own Ministry of Coordination of Government Functions. So I don't think there can be any excuse. You have seen from time to time the judiciary pushing back on some of the decisions that have been made by government.
Right.
And the safety has always been in following the law to the letter. I mean, you don't run into these headwinds. On the question of Nairobi, I agree with my sister that in fact there was some little optimism initially when this transition came. But even the question of how then this NMS has found itself in the space of, a devolved county. There are questions about their oversight. They were raised even in that judgment. Who oversights NMS? It is easy for you to say they have been able to do these things, but even their procurement is not as open as the procurement of other institutions. There's no assembly oversight. I mean, there is a lot of questions. And as a Nairobian myself, this is something that we wish Nairobians correct in 2022, because it starts with bad choices at the ballot.
Right.
If indeed we had a more stable, a more sober governor from the onset, we would not even be in this problem. You remember, by his own admission, he said he signed over the functions while not knowing what he was doing, the former governor of Nairobi. So all these things, and I hope that Nairobians have seen. Just look at your MCA, look at the work that they have done, look at their conduct in the assembly, and make a right choice when 2022 comes along. When the people present themselves for governorship, they must demonstrate capacity. There must be people of integrity. At the very minimum, there must be people who know what they are doing. So in future, I think the lessons have been learned. And Nairobians must interrogate very, very keenly. And especially a county like Nairobi. Your MCA is not the same as an MCA in my rural area. Look at the things that they have to deal with and the revenue and the resources at their disposal. At the very minimum, Nairobi MCAs must be on the level of members of parliament that are elected to the National Assembly.
And of course, the tenure of the NMS should expire at the next election?
It expires in February. I even don't know.
Before the next.
And they have to be very careful
to the election.
Because somebody will still go to court. That will be the most disastrous time. If they have not started even thinking of how to put in their reports, so that if nothing happens by February, you must have a transitional report saying, we have been having these functions and this is how we need a few months. And I think the Assembly, because it's something we will have to manage for them and help them. I wish the Assembly can look at the deed and just retable it on the floor of the House to extend a few months so that they leave in August as the new governor comes in. Because if you leave in February, so where are you handing it over to who now? You have no governor, you have nothing.
All right, let me begin with you, Honorable Manzo, because look, the president's decisions have been challenged several times, including the appointment of CAS Beatrice Elachi here, and the cabinet secretaries who are continuing from their previous term into this. Of course, the court said that they should have been vetted for the new term. Parastatal heads that the court said that were illegally hired or appointed, bearing in mind that there was no clear competitiveness or even public participation. And so I know, even in the time of President Kibaki, there were certain decisions that were challenged in court and overturned. But what lessons are we learning that will take into the next term so that the next president will be the second under the new constitution, in a full term? What lessons are we taking to that term?
Yeah, first a comment on the decision of that Barry cannot participate in cabinet. First, it originated from an executive order. And this is the Judicial Review Division. There is also the Constitutional Division, and it seems there are conflicting decisions. In this particular decision, you can see that the process has been flawed. But when you have an executive order, the Constitutional Court has held that an executive order serves as law up to the time another law is enacted, signed by the president again to overturn it. So you find there are conflict decision, and I think...
but can you say that when it's very clear on how people join cabinet? Even the secretary to the cabinet is vetted by Parliament.
Yes, the process is very clear. What I'm saying is this particular executive order may have overridden certain aspects of the Constitution. And the rationale given on appointment of body then was that in the event something goes wrong, it will easily be court-martialed or is easy to manage. But now when he goes to sit on cabinet, and as it has been stated before, there are mechanisms on how to manage Nairobi, even if there are certain functions now which are being handled by the national government through appropriate ministries and the county assembly and senate. So as much as this decision has been made, we need to learn lessons for the future, as you have asked. And part of it is also when we are reviewing the constitution in the future, we need to look at these aspects out of the experience we have gone with the 2010 constitution, so that we will now lay a base of things we need to correct in future out of the practice of administration of government, as we have seen with the challenges we have had gone through. Suppose in future a governor of Nairobi still has challenges. I remember even the first governor had serious challenges of cartels. The second governor was also held hostage by cartels, and was clear about that. So the management of Nairobi, and the main aspect be corruption, means even in future we need to have a government which is more serious with corruption. A lot of money is raised in Nairobi, a lot of revenue, but a lot of it is lost, and no one is ever charged and no one is ever prosecuted successfully. So one of the big things the country to look at is how do you deal with corruption, because if you have a government which is not serious on fighting corruption, then this is likely even to move into other counties. Already it is existing, but in a bigger way, and the country is likely to suffer more out of corrupt practices in the future. So that's one of the things as a country we really need to check. All these are resulted out of efforts to fight corruption from the county government of Nairobi.
Okay, and Honorable Onyonka, so look at this. Of course, there is the political reality, like for President Kenyatta having gone through at least the first term, come to second term, there are certain challenges that he had said that may need fixing. Of course, some were pursued through the Building Bridges initiative. But when you are to reflect about political reality versus, quote-unquote, what I may call the inconvenience of the law, what then must the next president do? Because some of these things are realities that you want to do something. How do you align your action plan with the law?
I think, to begin with, the way my friends and colleagues have said, the Attorney General, who a lot of people are given credit as a person who is highly qualified to be the person to actually advise the president effectively, to me, has made us get to where we are. This matter, even when you read the ruling without even having a lot of knowledge on the law, is very simple. That the law had to be followed on how General Badi was going to be appointed, his responsibilities and all that. So I think the Attorney General should be the one held responsible for this. Number two, the matter that brought Badi to where he is, I think we should start asking ourselves, shouldn't we look at Nairobi differently? Isn't Nairobi too big to fail? Shouldn't we, for example, split Nairobi into boroughs? And if need be, have whether it's a constitutional engagement, whether we are going to come up and say we are going to create different outfits which are part of Nairobi as the metropolis, and yet create different management and administrative units. And that obviously means constitutionally or legally for that matter. For me, I think these are critical issues that we need to look at. The incoming president will have to look at this issue. Badi has done well. Of course, these issues have come up, I think, like Manzo said, the issues of whether he was following the procurement law effectively and openly, the tendering system that he was using. A lot of people have complained about his engagement, and he was running Nairobi Metropolitan Services in a quasi hidden way,
right,
from public oversight or public exposure, and that made very many people uncomfortable. But as you hear our sister say, in fact, I am shocked that if Nairobi is in a worse mess than he found it, it means that Badi is just handling infrastructure, and yet the software of the structures which are supposed to be there to make sure that the resources of the city are managed well, are taken care of, are accounted for, and so that the city is able to sustain itself, has a problem. My fear and worry is we are going back to where Badi was a year ago, I think 2 years ago, that what do you do under the circumstances? I think the president was, in good faith, trying to come up with a, without having to become his spokesman. I think everybody, when Badi started, you can see the pavings which have been done, the hospitals which have been done, the water which has been provided for. All these projects which have been done in Nairobi City, everybody has appreciated. But the problem you have is, as High Excellency Lachi is saying, what is happening to the money issues? And this is what is most important, I think, for the city of Nairobi and the county of Nairobi. How can you have the second largest economy of our country being mismanaged, and basically it looks like it's okay? So for me, I think this is something that those who have an interest, like my brother here, SG, after the next dispensation, people need to look at this carefully and deeply. But I feel that Nairobi is too big to be managed by one person who's a governor, and maybe 40-something MCAs. I think Nairobi could be split. 124, sorry.
124.
Inclusive of the nominated?
Yes.
Okay. And because I think there's 17 constituencies and each has 5 votes, so that's
85
yes.
votes.
And so, but the question about the runnings with the law that the president has had, especially in this second term, a lot of decisions have been quashed and challenged. What does this mean, and what must the next president do? It means
we had not one understood this constitution, and maybe it's because it had never been implemented effectively, and 3, we were into our whole old habits. In other words, we were still seeing the presidency that if the president requires this, then you give it to him. And I think this is what the judiciary is saying. They're saying, Mr. President, we know that you are entitled to make certain decisions, but please follow the law. I think for me, that's why I said that the Attorney General, the buck stops with the Attorney General. He's the advisor to the President on legal matters. Did he, for example, did he ask for a judicial review on the matter of Mbadi being appointed into the cabinet? Did he have a look at it? And if you look at all these things, including the BBI, the AG is supposed to have advised the President on whether this is actually something that can be implemented. What are the challenges that we would face?
Are you sure he didn't?
Say what?
Are you sure he didn't?
No, I'm saying I don't know. I don't know. If he did, then BBI would not have been ruled against by the Supreme Court and the High Court.
SG Sifuna, the question I'm asking before you take a break, the question I'm asking is about, because there will be different legal opinions, just as many as lawyers that you are. But how must the next president, because a lot of people will say, but the buck stops with the president, but how must the next president make his decisions, knowing that he's at a point that he can receive a lot of counsel from different advisors that he has? How must he then make decisions to ensure that this untidiness of challenges in court, successful challenges, are not in their term?
First, I just want to say it is not always possible, even from a legal perspective, to predict how a court will interpret an action, or how you have perceived the law, whether it will be upheld or not. But I think it must be seen from the number of times that the court is striking down actions by government. It is evidence enough that probably there's something that is not working when it comes to legal advice that is going to the president. But in truth, is sometimes I tell people that this refrain that all politicians are the same is not actually true. There are people who are more prone to, or more amenable to advice. The people who are more amenable to listen to varying, opinions before they make a decision. And the others who are a bit more headstrong, they might be tend to, more likely to ignore sound advice, to do things on their own. So it really also depends on the nature of the person who's elected to State House. I am proud to say that I have a lot of faith in the, constitution of many of the people in ODM. An ODM government is least likely to disobey court orders. Given the legal talent that we have in the party, we are least likely to have many of the actions of our president being struck down.
How would we know that?
I mean, you can look around the party. You can look around the party and see the legal talent that is there. In fact, I don't think it will be wrong to say, Manzo, that in terms of political parties, ODM has the most stellar people from all the professions. We have the best lawyers, we have the best accountants.
Yet some of them have been part of litigation where they have lost.
Yeah, losing cases is normal. I lose cases, I win cases. I'm just saying. If you look at the makeup and the constitution of a party and the people who are there,
right?
We will be in a good place come 2022, especially if you have an ODM government.
But just to say this, it's that the general has very good intentions to see Nairobi move. The challenge is you cannot be a good person and your pillars are people who have been in this institution forever and they are the ones running, doing every implementation of your project. Definitely you will find us. So he's alone and all these others are very different people, animals who have been used to a different way of doing things and they have not changed. I think that's what my general faces.
Is it the same animal?
In fact, the good thing,
the county?
Well, the county is run externally, by the way. When I said I'll do a book for Nairobi, I was not joking. We are still putting in. Somebody needs to read Nairobi.
Did you just say that the county is run from outside?
Yeah, with external people. They will decide today. Here is a motion. You'll find an MCA running with a motion. You think it's his mind. When you read it, you realize, what is this? And you'll ask him, say, no. Kumbe, somebody outside has felt something of his is being removed and he needs it back. So you use the politician to do that.
What's the character of those people who are doing that? Who are those people?
They are there. The only problem...
politicians, business persons?
Business persons. Nairobi is run by business persons. And to be very honest, I know I'll be hit on the blog, on everything, the way they like abusing, they can do that. But we have to save Nairobi. Do you know it is also run by very few individuals of one religion? Very few, which is very sad. And that is why I'm saying the president has to look the inner. What is this? And there are many complaints, and I know he has received. He has received letters, he has people crying, and it is true. Pending bills can be, you can imagine the other day they went to discuss their pending bills in Turkey. You fly to Turkey to discuss your pending bills from 2013. Members. You see, even when we gave in an executive order that there is COVID, people are suffering. If the Auditor General walks into Nairobi County today, the report he can table to Parliament, every Kenyan will feel very sad. Wait
a minute. MCAs went to Turkey to discuss pending bills?
Pending bills.
On whose sponsorship?
On their own sponsorship. But you have not put on their own sponsorship. On taxpayers' sponsorship.
You are the sponsor.
Even this thing of ESCC asking me why we promoted. They had spent 5 million shillings to do a report with Deloitte. How do you just leave it in the cupboard? And you've spent taxpayers' money, 5 million. And I promoted everyone anyway because it was a progression career where the director is at 10, your deputy is at 6. So if you move or if something happens to you, how are we going to fill this position and there's nobody in between? So you look at even ESCC and you wonder, can they save Nairobi for us before they go into...
Is that why you walked away?
Yes, because you're telling them this is wrong. You're telling them there's COVID. You don't have money for foreign travel. Today, the executive is under siege. Every week, they have to pay foreign travel. I understand even they have pending bills of foreign travel to pay. people 5 million, 10 million. I mean, where are we?
Speaker Ilachi, I think Nairobi deserves a special story.
Absolutely.
To look at the challenge.
And a special audit. I want to say, cry to my sister, the auditor, a special audit to save us.
It's okay, CS. I want us to take a short break because there's so much more that we need to talk about, including the politics of the nation, the latest in politics, but also the lessons that we must learn from 2017 as we go into the 2022 election cycle. After the break, stay tuned.